In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make a knotted bracelet. You're seeing here, using a waxed linen thread and the Nunn Design organic beads and toggle and clasp. For this tutorial, you will need to have some waxed linen thread. You'll need 21 inches. I'm going to use the black on this one. You will also need a variety of Nunn Design bindings. I have them ready to go. So I'm using the Nunn Design organic beads, and these have a 1.5 millimeter hole, so these are ideal for the 12 ply of the waxed linen thread. So these are cast and lead-free pewter and then plated. I also have two smaller size beads. These are a 4 millimeter faceted, again, very wide hole. And those are what we're using on the ends to crimp beads onto the waxed linen thread. You will also need to have a pair of scissors and a pair of Beadin pliers. These are flat, very flat, nice and smooth, and this is what I use to crimp those beads on. So go ahead and pull 21 inches of your waxed linen thread out, and this is going to be one continuous knotted bracelet. We'll have a little bit of excess at the end. So these holes are awesome because you can thread through the waxed linen thread, and we're actually going to thread it through twice, threading it back through and then crimping it. So the first step we're going to do is thread on one of the 4 millimeter beads and then add the toggle ring, and then we're going to come back through this end here. To get a nice sharp point on this waxed linen thread, you can sculpt it with your fingers. This is slightly tacky. The wax seems to fade or gets less tacky with time, but it's ideal for when you're first assembling this and knotting it. So I'm threading it back through that hole, and zoom in a little bit tighter here. So I'm threading it back through that hole, and you can see it's coming out that other end, and then I just slide it down into place. Now, depending on the length that you're going to want to make your bracelet, 7.5 inches is a typical bracelet, but this could also be used as a guide bracelet, so you might want to consider making it even longer. And some of the things that you can do to adjust the length is adjusting where this clasp is going to be crimped. So I'm just throwing it on to start. And actually I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot. So I'm going to allow about that much space. And I'm going to crimp this down into position. I'm actually going to use my other end to adjust my length over here, and just go ahead and get started right here on this end. So put that into position, and I'm looking for a flat part of that faceted bead, and with my crimp end, I'm just placing it right inside of that crimp, right where it's nice and flat, and just slightly squishing it, and it'll flatten. This is a cast pewter, and then it's plated with 24 karat gold, so it crimps down into position, and that is what will hold that thread in place. Then with the excess, I'm just going to trim away this end here with my scissors. Now I'm ready to start to knot. So for knotting this, I'm using an overhand knot. So you make a loop like this, and then I'm coming in with the tail through the loop. And see how I'm holding this right in position. This helps my knot come right down next to where I want. So I have a nice knot here. And now I'm using my fingers to kind of pull it down towards that knot. So pulling, pulling, pulling with my fingers and pulling with this thread and bringing that knot down into position before I tighten it. I can also use my fingernail to kind of pull on it to get it really tight and nice and flush next to that first starting bead. So this is a 12 ply wax linen thread, and it is awesome for using with these Nunn Design beads because they have a nice wide hole. So I'm ready to thread on my first bead. If any time during this you have a challenge getting the thread through, you can always use a pair of those round nose needle pliers to kind of just go in and slightly open up the bead. But I don't think you'll have any issues with these. So I'm just going to thread this on, bring it down right next to where my knot is at my starting point. Do that overhand knot again, so that was an over, so I looped it over. I'm kind of crimping it with my finger to keep it in position, coming up with the tail through that loop. Oop. Stuck on my handle of the flat needle-nose pliers. Then I have a nice knot. I'm pulling it this way with the thread and bringing it down close to where my bead is before I tighten it. Whoop. So if that's a little bit loose, but that's going to be fine. It'll allow it to have some movement. And then you just continue to add beads on. Tightening that a little bit. So I moved that knot. I just put another bead on and then pulled on it to tighten that knot all the way over. An overhand knot. Bring my tail up through the loop. I'm holding this into position, getting my knot, and then pulling it, bringing it down next to the bead, and then pulling tight. Alright, so I'm going to continue to bead this until I get to that other end. So I want to see where this is going to be positioned onto my wrist, because I'm going to be adding a couple of other color beads onto the bracelet. And I liked to have this color a little bit off-centered, not like directly in the middle. I just kind of like, I think it's visually interesting to have it slightly off-centered. So I'm going to add one more bead on, and then I'll start with adding some gold beads on. Alright, for our ending we have the toggle bar and we have the 4mm faceted tube bead. Go ahead and put the 4mm faceted tube bead string on the bar, and then we're going to come back through that hole. And zoom in here, we're going to come back through this hole and then we're going to crimp it. So I'm going to make this nice and smooth and flat. Press it right up next to where the entrance to the hole is. Squeeze those two wax linen threads together and then just thread the bead. See how it just came right through on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to pull this end tail and bring this down. Alright, so before I pull that and crimp that bead on, I'm going to want to check my length of my bracelet here. So I have a ruler, and a standard bracelet size is going to be a total of 7.5 inches, which is about right here. So I'm pulling it and stretching that cord out, that thread out a little bit longer. So if you wanted to, you could have put an extra bead on the end. If you'd like to make it even shorter, 7.5 inches is actually still too long for me. So like a 7-inch bracelet would be a better fit. So let me just show you. Although this is a little bit chunkier bracelet, I recommend that you kind of make it a little bit bigger, even if you have a 7-inch wrist. You don't want it to be too tight. So you can see even for a 7-inch, that's a little bit of space there. And it's also important that it's be long enough so that the toggle can come in and out of the bar. Alright, so 7.5 inches even for my smaller size wrists, because these beads are so chunky. Alright, so then last step here is I'm going to crimp this end here. So I want it to be about right there. Looking for a flat section on my faceted bead. And place your bead inside of the needle nose flat pliers and just slightly, it just goes down so nicely. It crimps so nicely. And that will secure that into place, and then you trim off the excess. Now I said that you would need to have a 21-inch length for this bracelet with your wax linen thread, and I actually did 2 feet, so you can see that I had an extra bit. I actually prefer to have this extra little bit because it helps me pull on the bracelet, but if you wanted to be really spot on, you could use 21 inches and not have any excess waste. And there you have it. So once you kind of figure out, all of these steps for doing the basic knotting, you can mix up your beads and do a variety of other types of beads. Like this just uses a couple of the tube beads. The ends are crimped like we started, then just knotting all the way around, and then crimping at the other end where the toggle bar is. So a totally different look, much faster, very simple. That's the same technique as what you're seeing here. Great, thanks very much. Bye.